And good morning and welcome to the Skinny for Friday, January 24th. I'm Mitch Perry, the senior political reporter for the Florida Phoenix. And I'm by myself this morning. Both my colleagues Ray Roa and Ben Montgomery are out today, but they'll be back next Friday. Look forward to seeing them. On the program today, later we'll speak with a candidate running for vice chair of the Florida Democratic Party. Tomorrow in Orlando, the State Executive Committee of the Florida Democratic Party will convene in Orlando to conduct their quadrennial state organizational meeting. Also, who will be a candidate tomorrow, who's in studio right now, is Democratic National Committee member Alan Clendenin, who also happens to be a Tampa City Council member. Good morning, Alan. Welcome to the Skinny.
Good morning, Mitch. Glad to be here on a very cold morning.
Yes. A series of cold mornings here. You're a long-time Tampa guy, and must be, when you one of the last time was this cold for this long?
I don't remember it being this cold for so long. You know, we're so used to having the cold to snap, and then it warms right back up, but it's like it just won't go away. And the crazy thing is, my sister and my daughter live in Anchorage, Alaska. They've had a total of 3 inches of snow. The panhandle of Florida has had more snow this year than Anchorage, Alaska.
Was it 9 inches in Milton, Florida?
Insane.
Yeah, indeed.
Hell has frozen over.
Well,
the great state of DeSantis has frozen over.
We did have an inauguration, of course, earlier this week, and we can get to that later. I definitely want to get into a lot of stuff with the Democratic Party because you've been very involved with it for many years. But let's talk about your work on the Tampa City Council. I know for years you were not involved in politics, in terms of being a public official. And then the last, decade, I think you sort of ran for school board initially and then for city council. Interesting, your trajectory of your life here in terms of getting involved later on, as it were, in being a public servant.
Well, yeah. I've been involved in politics because I understand the importance of it has on day-to-day lives of my family and my friends and, of course, everyone else that lives in our community. Since I was 16 years old, I volunteered in my first political campaign living in Central Florida.
What was that for?
Okay, you're going to age me. You can't tell by the gray in my beard. It was for Jimmy Carter.
Yeah,
so
okay.
It was a long time ago. But I was very involved in grassroots politics. I was a union organizer, and I was involved in the political arm of the union and helped do a lot of things in Washington, D.C. for 6 years, benefiting the Air Traffic Controllers Union as an air traffic controller. Right. And we were actually the first labor union in history for federal employees to be able to negotiate salaries and benefits, and that was through political action. So, we live in a world that is we're governed by politicians, and if we don't get involved and we don't attempt to have our voices heard, other people's voices will be heard. So, I've always felt that I needed to be out there fighting for people that can't necessarily fight for themselves, or don't have the ability to fight for themselves, and that's what I've always just stood for my entire life. And then I had the luxury. I was able to retire. When I retired, I was able to have the time to run, and I had a passion. You spoke about school board. I had a passion for public education. Still have a passion for public education and how important it is to our country. So I put myself out there. I was not successful, but I did run for city council and was successful, and have been serving and enjoying the ride.
All right, well, let's get into the city council, your work there. I wanted to ask you about, this is going to happen, you're looking at passing a $3 million financial assistance program targeted to help families who are lower income, working class, or middle class families with mortgage assistance. That is about to happen. Where are we at with that?
It's just one more program and many things that the city of Tampa works on to help folks that need that hand up. We have had and continue to have multiple programs in the city of Tampa for mortgage assistance, rental assistance, and improving folks' homes that are unable to improve their homes. If they need a roof, to be able to keep, especially senior citizens in houses, single parents. There's a multitude of problems that people face, and I believe that this city council and the administration understands the role that the city government has. We're not the solution because, the budget's just what the budget is. We can't be everything to everybody, but where we can provide assistance to citizens of Tampa to keep them in their homes, to improve neighborhoods, to make sure that kids have a place to live and senior citizens are not kicked out, we redo that. And that $3 million is just one of many programs that we're working on.
So in November, the council approved a very contentious flood relief plan project in South Tampa that seemed to bitterly divide the community. You voted to enter into an initial design build contract worth more than $7.7 million with Kimmins Contracting Corporation. They're now tasked with coming up with a final recommendation for the South Howard Flood Relief and Streetscape project. This is estimated to be a $65 million project in South Howard, calling for major upgrades to the area's stormwater system. We all know, anybody who's lived there or driven through there knows, way before with our big hurricanes and any it rains for an hour and you got problems driving down the street there. So obviously there's a need there. Your mobility director, Vic Bendy, says it will improve drainage 5 times its current state. You support the plan. You had some prominent business people in the community like David Laxer and Jared Dyer, who owns Bella's, against it. Was that a tough call for you or no?
You know, one thing I've learned about now serving on council, everything's a tough call. There is no one vote that's going to be, it's just, there's very rarely do you get something that's truly easy because there's always 2 edges to the sword. And, and it's never a perfect problem. One thing I also have learned since serving on council is we are decades behind in our infrastructure. And I mean, decades and decades and decades behind in our infrastructure. I'm not going to point fingers backwards because it's pointless to, of who's to blame and how we got to where we are, but we are where we are. And now I'm sitting in a seat where I can help do something about it. It's something that is going to have to be incrementalism of being able to affect the change, to be able to, put things back together where they belong. But I mean, our storm infrastructure, we've made great strides. We have the stormwater program that was passed a few years ago, the pipes program, the pipes program that this administration has been working on, our waste management plan. We have a lot of infrastructure that's in place. I don't think people realize billions of dollars things that are happening in the city of Tampa. But it's still going to take a long time to get it back together. The Parkland Estates issue is just one of many issues in the community that we're having to solve. That particular area is really bad. The area is like a bowl, and it collects water, and it's a complicated problem to try to get that water out of there, especially when we have torrential rain and then back-to-back rainstorms like we had with Milton, and then the few rainstorms prior to that. So we had saturated ground, and then we had 15 to 19 inches of rainfall with Milton. I'm really good friends with those business owners, and I'm very empathetic, and I've been fighting for their cause to try to mitigate as much as we can. But sometimes sometimes you just have to make the call, and that for the greatest amount of good, for the greatest amount of people, you have to, for lack of a better word, we have to suck it up, and for the time that it takes to fix it.
We are speaking with Tampa City Council member and Democratic National Committee member Alan Clendenin. I'm Mitch Perry here on The Skinny. A couple more questions about Tampa, and then we'll move on to talking about the Democratic Party. Let's talk about transportation. Or actually, before we get there, because I know you want to talk about transportation, also in November, you approved a $6 million plan to revitalize the Franklin Street corridor in downtown Tampa. This is expected to take 3. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to stop there. I want to go back to you talk about the infrastructure, because I remember reading in the Tampa Tribune like 20 years ago, actually, when Mayor Pam Iorio was in office, and she was looking at that time, because the pipes at that point had been like 100 years old, and maybe some of them still are, that you're trying to repair now.
Yes, they are.
And this is really an American problem, though, right? I think we're really seeing this all around the country in our cities, that and it does cost a lot of money, but that you have to do it.
Yeah, billions. And to the credit of the administration and your city government, the people that represent folks in the city of Tampa, they have stepped up to the plate, and we're one of the few cities that we are doing something about it. We are replacing all these pipes. It's frustrating because people see all these projects and streets are dug up, and there's street closures. Between stormwater and pipes, the infrastructure that you don't see, it's not sexy. So a lot of times politicians don't like to deal with this stuff because it's not shiny new things. People can't see it, but it's something that everybody depends upon. When you turn the faucet on your sink, you expect clean water to come out. When you flush your toilet, you expect the dirty water to go away. Well, there's some areas there we're a little bit questionable on, but we're fixing those problems. We are going to be one of the few cities in the country that are tackled the projects, and it's happening right now as we speak.
Okay, so Franklin Street, $6 million. Project expected to take 3 years, and included is described as a more pedestrian-friendly mix of retail, residential, and commercial space. Is this going to be worth it, though? What's the goal here? Is it to help bring more people downtown? Or what?
No, I think generally every project in the city of Tampa has, a niche or a particular element of our city where it benefits both economically and for the citizens for the quality of life issues. Franklin Street is for a relatively modest amount of money, and it's there was a failed project when they did the pedestrian mall. They kind of put a Band-Aid to create what we see today, but it still doesn't work. So we have some areas that are problematic, and we need, and it is an important thoroughfare. It's a historic corridor. We have our beautiful Tampa Theater on that, and mm-hmm. connections with the government buildings, and of course all these residents that are coming downtown. It was a very modest investment to greatly improve that corridor. The irony is that it wasn't necessarily one of my passion projects. One of the things that I'm targeting is Marion Street. I keep speaking with the HART representatives. That was again a failed project. That transportation corridor, it's not utilized, and it's a dead zone. And so I was actually initially concerned about spending the money on Franklin mm-hmm. because I wanted to reserve it to rethink what we're doing with Marion Street and maybe take back control from HART, because there's a lot of opportunity there. There's a lot of development opportunity. I'd love to see it as an arts kind of district with art galleries and cafes, and I think it would be a really amazing street. And it's a great north-south corridor that runs from the north end of the city all the way to the south end. So it has the potential of being a grand boulevard, a really great street. So that's when my vision of downtown Tampa. I'd like to see us start focusing a little bit more in that area. And again, we're in that discussion with HART, and hopefully we'll come to an agreement before I leave office.
You do want to talk about transportation. We know that we do have a streetcar that's been, of course, happening, and there's been talk for years about expanding that streetcar to get it out. Right now, basically, goes from Ybor City down to the Channelside area, or Water Street area, I guess we call it now, but also having that go further north in the city.
Absolutely. As we speak, we are in the process of, we've taken the initial steps. We have... It's coming. We have so when I got into office, it was kind of dead, deceased, no more. It was a dead process as far as building the extension. We've resurrected that. I've worked closely with the administration to get that going, along with my fellow members of City Council. We are in the process of extending the streetcar from where it terminates now around the convention center. It's going to go over to Florida, go north on Florida, go to Columbus, make a left either on Columbus or right before Columbus, make a left, turn left down on Tampa Street, circle back in for a great circle. We're going to triple the amount of rail that the streetcar exists. It's one of the most popular streetcars in the United States of America. It is a opportunity for folks, especially when we expand this, triple the amount of rail. You can live from Tampa Heights, downtown, Encore, Water Street, the Gas Works, Ybor City, literally car free, because you can get to grocery stores, you can get to pharmacies, you can get to doctor's office, you can get to all of our cultural amenities. The Tampa Theater, Museum of Art, Straz, the Aquarium, the Amalie Arena, the Convention Center, all can be serviced on the streetcar. And then the University of Tampa, and they just have to literally walk across the bridge, and they can jump, and the kids from the University of Tampa can jump on the streetcar. So if people get frustrated by traffic, know that every person that gets on a mass mode of transportation is one less car on the street. So it's going to take cars out of the street. We won't have to worry as much about finding places to park cars downtown. So we maybe won't see these seas of parking lots and
okay, so what is it going to take? Obviously, a lot of dollars. And where are we at with that?
We have support from the state. The FDOT and the Secretary for our district for the Florida Department of Transportation has been very cooperative and really supportive of the city and their agenda. The Transportation Planning Organization, which I sit on, it's one of the highest priority items on the agenda. We have money kind of reserved from federal money as well. We have to put together the equation between using money from the CRAs and probably bonding to be able to get to close the deal. But it's we're working on it. It's coming slow. It's a lot. One thing also about government, it moves a lot slower than anybody wants it to. It's just there's a lot of processes and to go through, and especially something like this, because there's a lot of digging. There's a lot of infrastructure, a lot of cross department coordination. So it takes probably from the time I got in office, I was given an estimate. It would take 6 years. So we're probably a year and a half into that. So at least another 4.5 years before we start to see something.
And then one last question about downtown, and that is the Riverwalk. Let's see here. The council voted recently 5-2 to use $10 million over 3 years from a West Tampa taxing district to subsidize the pedestrian pathway. Now, some people think this is maybe not a necessity here. And I saw former Tampa Mayor Bob Buckhorn weigh in yesterday on X. I think he retweeted a story about this, and he said the completion of the Riverwalk transformed our city. To call it a vanity project is nothing but posturing and the peddling of lies. Whoa, okay. But you're support of this?
100%.
Yeah.
And that, again, back to transportation. You call it Riverwalk, and it sounds like it's something that's, fancy. This is not going to be fancy. It's going to be a mixed modal way for people to bike, scooter, and walk in very critical elements of development where we're increasing density in the city of Tampa. So on the west side of the river, which will run from basically the terminus of Bayshore now, all the way along the river to the north, all the way up to Columbus, go down Columbus to Rome, and then we're going to go down Rome to Platte and then link back in. Then there's going to be a connection from the east side of the river, walk up through Ridgewood Park, their neighborhood there, to Columbus to link back in. This is not a fancy, tourist-driven river walk. And again, most of it is not even on the river. It's enhanced bike paths, protected bike paths, sidewalks, and infrastructure to allow people to move through the city in a different type of way. And what I'll tell people, because I get the criticism, bike paths, why are we doing these bike paths? Usually when I hear that, it's from somebody that's my age. I look at them, I said, we're not making them for you. We're making them for this next generation of people on electric bikes, and these, this next generation of modality that's coming out. And these generations that are going to come up, they're going to be riding electric bicycles. And so we're building the infrastructure for tomorrow, not for today.
All right, I'm going to segue now to talk about DNC matters, but I guess we have had David from Tampa on the phone line here for a while here. And by the way, if you do want to chime in here, 813-239-9663 is the phone number. David, hi, you're on the air.
Hey, guys. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, David.
Sorry, I think I got the bad phone line. It's all staticky, but I was curious about, with the streetcar, one issue, and I don't know if it's ever been resolved, but, there was like a single tracking issue between like Channel Side and Ybor, and you had to kind of wait for one streetcar had to wait for several minutes while the other one would pass because there was just the single set of tracks. But I was wondering, has that been resolved yet?
That particular segment of the streetcar still is single. Then they have passing lanes to allow that. And when everything works the way it's supposed to work, they time everything, and it's kind of seamless. Every once in a while, that will, because of traffic or some other extenuating circumstances, it'll throw that sequencing off. The extension, which is double the amount of track we have now, will actually be one-way type of tracks. Again, it'll go from where it terminates now at the Fort Brooke Garage. It'll cut over to Florida, go one way northbound on Florida, turn west on Columbus, and then turn left on Tampa and go one way southbound on Tampa. So we won't encounter that on this section that we're expanding on.
That's great. I
Yeah,
wanted to mention one real quick thing about bikes and pedestrians. I'm real excited that the new Howard Franklin Bridge is going to have a dedicated
Absolutely.
pedestrian area, which is really exciting. That's so cool.
That's getting closer to completion.
Yeah, it's amazing the amount of progress and the amount of concrete that they put out there. No, it's important elements, and people have to realize that there is not one solution for everyone and every age demographic. We have to, when you build these things out, it has to take into account, the multitude and the diversity of the folks that live in the city and where they live and how they live.
All right.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
All right, thank you, David. Okay, so tomorrow you're going to be in Orlando. The Democrats are having one of their meetings. You are one right now of 447 members of the Democratic National Committee, and you've been a DNC member since 2008. I've known you since that time, basically, always savvy on the national issues going on. And also, let's talk about the state party here. What to talk about. Nikki Fried is running for re-election. She's being challenged by former Jacksonville state lawmaker Audrey Gibson. Who are you supporting in that race?
I'm staying out of it, but I will say that Senator Audrey Gibson has been a dear friend of mine for over 2 decades. Her and I were really grassroots Democrats when we first met before she got into politics as well. She's a very similar kind of story. She was a grassroots activist in Duval County, and then she ended up running for office and got into office and has served the state well. Nikki Fried obviously being the last statewide elected Democrat in this for Florida, has been serving for the Florida Democratic Party for the last just about 2 years. She served out the duration of one term. Usually terms are 4 years, but she only got half because she took over for someone else. Manny Diaz. And so we are, I think I'm trying to stay out of it because I've got my own race to run. Because I'm up for re-election tomorrow. So I'm trying to stay neutral on it. I think Nikki has done as good of a job as you could possibly do, considering the circumstances that we have. I think that she's got a lot of strengths. Audrey's a wonderful human being. I consider her a very dear friend, a personal friend. There we go.
Okay, all right. And then, of course, there's a big... But I'll talk about the national because I know there's a race for the Democratic National Committee chair. But let's stick with the state right now. I interviewed you, if you remember this, Alan, a couple years ago, right after Ron DeSantis won by 19 points against Charlie Crist 2 years ago, and Marco Rubio won by 16 points over Val Demings. And you told me, and this is my story, that it was going to get worse. 2024 was going to be worse than 2022, which I know a lot of Democrats did not want to contemplate at that time, but you were dead on. It seems to me the number one issue is simply the fact there's way more registered Republicans than Democrats in the state right now. My gosh, Donald Trump won by 13 points in November over Kamala Harris. Rick Scott won by 13 points over Debbie Merkersol-Powell. We've never seen this in this state in terms of the Republican dominance. And we know it's going to take a while to get out of this for the Democrats. So there's not, one thing we can talk about here. But it even got worse here in Hillsborough County, right, where we had you had a Democratic election last month with Ione Townsend stepping down. Vanessa Lesser ran against Susan Valdez, state representative here in Hillsborough County. Vanessa won. The next, right after that, Valdez announced he was becoming a Republican. That was something. We've seen a second Democrat, Hillary Cassell, down in South Florida, do the same thing. I don't know if you saw, she had an interview with Miami, CBS Miami the other day. Not so convincing in terms of why she did that. But anyway, it's a tough time for Florida Democrats right now. Where are you at in your mindset as you go into Orlando tomorrow, this meeting?
The reality is, and again, the voter registration was definitely, you can see this. This is not a surprise because you can see it building, you can see it coming. We know part of the reasons why. The governor has done an outstanding job of selling Florida, especially from COVID on, of the great free state of Florida. So a lot of these very conservative people from other states have looked at Florida as an opportunity, and they've come down here. On the reverse side of that, it cuts both ways. A lot of young people are frustrated with the anti-LGBT movement down here. The hate that has been spewed, and there's a lot of people that have not felt comfortable being here. So a lot of young people have fled. I mean, I've spoken with lots of folks that have fled. So it's double. We're bringing people here that are more aligned with this ultra right wing MAGA movement. And the young people, instead of staying here and fighting, have decided to give up and go to more progressive places to live. So that cuts both ways. I think that one we could see coming. I think one of the more disturbing factors is the voters that we would have traditionally expected to vote and vote for our candidates because of the values they represent, that either fled us and actually voted against us or stayed home. And I think that's what the Democrats have a challenge, is working back to this base, making sure that the working men and women of this state knows what we stand for, and making sure that our members of our Black community understand who we've fought for and who we continue to fight for, making sure members of the LGBT community and, young people, this whole influence that Joe Rogan and crypto and all had on these young people. I think the check is going to come and it's going to bounce for Donald Trump, the Republican House and the Republican Senate. They're going to overreach. They're already over. We're just. I mean, I know it's only been days, but it seems like it's already years. The exhaustion of what's coming out of Washington D.C. I have to expect that this is going to continue because the best indicator of what's happening is what's already happened. We're going to see more and more of this. He just pardoned people that tried to overthrow the United States of America and beat police officers, tried to gouge out the eyes of police officers. I don't know what world I'm living in. It's absolute insanity that these folks and it's still entertaining the idea of not just pardoning them and putting them on the street, inviting them to the White House. I'm without words. I don't know what to say.
It's 11:30 right now. If you're just tuning in to WNF's The Skinny program, I'm Mitch Perry, your host. My co-hosts are not with me today, but I'm here with Alan Clendenin, Tampa City Council member and a member of the Democratic National Committee. In just a moment, we're going to talk to a candidate running for vice chair of the Florida Democratic Party who will be up for election tomorrow. We'll get to that in just a moment. We do have a couple phone calls, though. Let's get to that right now. We've got Connie calling in from Tampa. Hi, Connie. You're on The Skinny.
Yes, hello. I hope you, Councilman Allen, take a very good, hard look at the promises that has been made to Black Democrats in terms of reducing poverty in our community. Even in Tampa, we see large segment of blight and poverty. And what I'm noticing is that you all on the city council move in small increments in dealing with the issue. So we will have another national election, and we will have a city election in 2027. And I hope y'all give that some consideration as to if Black people will continue to be loyal to a base that tend to ignore our issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Thoughts?
Yeah, thank you, Connie. Absolutely, and I think that's something that every elected official should always consider of who they represent. And I think that is, I would have to say that I have to stand up for the Democratic Party, especially in comparison to the alternative. What was there? There's an adage of don't compare me to God Almighty, compare me to the alternative. You know, it's while we're not perfect, the other side is absolutely is vile. I mean, and so detrimental to not just the Black community, but so many of the constituencies that the Democratic Party represents. They are literally going to start kicking down doors and ripping babies out of people's hands.
But you are losing some of the voters who are not ideological, right? I mean, who just want to, in terms of
price of eggs.
right. As well as, inflation was a killer. I'm going to get to immigration in a minute because I want to get your thoughts about that. Do you want to take a couple of these more phone calls here before we do that? John from Lutz calling in The Skinny. Hi, John.
Yes, good morning. I agree that it is outrageous that 1,500 violent mob criminals were released. But another thing that's outrageous is that coming up on Monday's Hillsborough County Democratic meeting, Nikki Fried is leading a charge to expel a gentleman simply because he opposes the genocide going on in Palestine. That is outrageous, and I think that's why the Democrats lost, is because Biden has been arming a genocide, and we have got to get AIPAC out of the Democratic Party, or the Democratic Party is going to cease to exist.
Okay, John,
we
thank you.
We can no longer support genocide.
Right. That is, of course, it was a dividing line. Certainly, the Israeli-Hamas conflict divided parts of the Democratic Party. Certainly, it seemed to hurt Kamala Harris in Michigan. And I know what the caller was just calling about is regarding somebody who's a member of the DEC. And that is an issue. Are you aware much of that at all? Yeah. So I don't.
No. And this is the complexity of the Democratic Party. Is we are, that big tent. It is our strength and it is our weakness when it comes to electoral politics. We represent a large swath of the population, and some of them are diametrically opposed to one another. We have the issue on women's reproductive health care. But we have a lot of members of the Hispanic community who are, Catholics and are completely, opposed to abortion. A lot of folks in our community are have issues with the different segments of the group. So, in order to govern this large group, it's very complex. It's a really difficult thing. But I think the bottom line is we have to convince people that we're there to fight for everyone, to ensure that the justice is equal for all, and that we are there to hold up basic human values that the Democratic Party has always stood for.
Okay, we're going to go. We'll take one more call, and then we're going to go to Daniel Henry, who's waiting on Zoom to talk to us here. Nancy from St. Petersburg. Nancy, you're on the radio.
Hi. I was just absolutely. I know I shouldn't have been shocked, but I was that Trump went and rescinded LBJ. How many years ago was that? How many years ago was that? And we've just taken every stride that has been made for democracy for everybody back all those years. He's rescinded all the federal the guarantees for employment without discrimination, and it's just the first step. And I'm so sorry that it's like the death knell for democracy. It truly is, unless somebody gets up and says something, for God's sake.
Yeah, okay. Nancy, do you think the Democrats have been, well, again, we're just talking about the 1 week here of the Trump presidency, but some would say a lot of Democrats since the election have pretty much been pretty quiet here trying to absorb it all.
What are we afraid of?
When they're hanging themselves, you stand back and watch. And I think that's part of what's happening right now. They're hanging themselves. There's going to be an opportunity. There's going to be a time, and when you take action, you make it quick and decisive. And I think that's what you'll see from Hakeem Jeffries and our other leaders in the party.
You tell our black folks that they just got to wait till the right time, right? 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 I mean, that's nuts. That has always been our worst thing that we have ever done when we are as a democracy. We've asked people to wait for their turn. And being born in this country is their turn. It's everybody's turn. And yet we let it slip through our fingers every time for greed and horrible people who want power. And we should not let that happen, ever.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much for the phone call. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Okay, we're going to go now to, as we mentioned, tomorrow in Orlando, Democrats are meeting. Allen's up for re-election for DNC member. Nikki Fried is up for re-election for Florida Democratic Party chair. And there's a race for the vice chair. And remember, a couple of weeks ago, we had Jane D'Onofrio, who's running, the young 20-year-old, who's running for vice chair. He's running against Daniel Henry, who's the 33-year-old chairman of the Duval County Democratic Executive Committee. And Daniel was with us via Zoom right now. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, Mitch. How's it going?
Great to have you here with us.
Good morning, Daniel.
Hey, Alan.
Hey, I will tell you that I've actually endorsed Daniel Henry.
Okay. Well, we get there. Okay, so tell our listeners right now, Daniel, you're running to be vice chair of the Florida Democratic Party. Why do you want to be vice chair?
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. So, my name is Daniel Henry. I've been chair of the Duval County Democratic Party for the last 6 years, and we've been able to accomplish a lot of great things up in Jacksonville. We were able to turn our county from red to blue for the first time in 46 years for Vice President Biden. We were able to elect our first Democratic county mayor in over a decade, who happened to be the first female to hold that position this last year. And we found a way to make sure that we're collaborating not only with our candidates, but with our elected officials and grassroots organizations to be able to achieve a common goal. And I think that's a lot of lessons that we can bring to the Florida Democratic Party, and why I'm running for vice chair. We know we have a messaging problem. We know we have to do a better job when it comes to connecting with communities of color and with the different regions that represent our state. But it's going to take a lot of hard work over multiple years to be able to get to a point where we not only earn the trust of voters, but we ensure that we work on voter registration parity and vote by mail enrollment and finding ways for us to be able to connect with everyday Floridians. In a state that has been controlled by Republicans for the last 30 years, and every day becomes more difficult to live in and more expensive to live in. And with all of these experiences, I think it's going to be critical that we elect officers that not only understand the passion that is necessary to be able to carry that message, but have the experience in the receipts to show what they've been able to do this same work. And that's why I decided to run.
Okay, and we should tell listeners that you were the youngest chair in the Duval County's history, and actually in the first African-American to be elected, male to be elected as the chair there. And you've been reelected the last 3 times, 2022 and 2024. Okay, we talked about this with Alan a moment ago. Again, there's deep-seated issues in terms of the Democratic Party becoming competitive in elections here. And so you mentioned registration. information? Because I think that's a key one that a lot of people thought the efforts were not as robust as they could be. Now, obviously, there's just a numbers issue when you've got so many Republicans who've come in here over the last few years here. But what do you say to folks who maybe young people, and you're young yourself at 33, who are disaffected? They don't think the Democratic Party is maybe talking to them in a way that appeals to them. And you saw, Donald Trump, as we all know, made inroads with every demographic better than he did in 2020 or 2016. And that included younger people. That included people of color. Maybe it wasn't a large numbers when it came to the black community, but nevertheless, as you mentioned, it seems to be more than a messaging problem this party has here. Daniel, what are your thoughts there?
Well, I can tell you the conversations that I have with voters every single day, and particularly during the election. And when I talk to voters, young voters, voters of color, sometimes it was difficult for them to be able to truly understand what our party stood for and what we were going to do to make sure that their lives are better, that we were addressing the housing crisis, that we were addressing how expensive it is to be able to buy groceries or be able to deal with inflation. And there's many things that the Biden-Harris administration did to be able to deal with these issues. But one thing that Democrats are consistently bad at is talking about the things that we do and how they affect people's daily lives. And despite many of the derogatory, racist, and many negative things that President Trump has said in the past or during the campaign, what people were really hearing from him, unfortunately, was someone that was going to fight for them and that was going to make their effort to be able to make their lives better. And I think in order for us to be able to counter that in the future, we're going to have to make sure that we meet people where they are, not just using legacy media as a way for us to be able to connect with them, not using generic messaging that we think will apply to all racial demographics across the entire state, and not recognizing the unique challenges that people face every single day in their daily lives. That is, I think, something that is going to be important for us to be able to work on in future elections, and for us to recognize that it's not going to be one election cycle that this work gets achieved. It's going to have to take multiple years in order for us to be able to get out of the ditch that we find ourselves. But I know that we're committed to be able to do that, and I know we're passionate about making sure that we make that case to voters every day.
We are talking with Daniel Henry. He is a candidate for the vice chair for the Florida Democratic Party. They are having their meeting tomorrow in Orlando. He'll be up for an election there. One last question with you, Daniel, and that is, you mentioned the phrase I've heard a lot from Democrats: we need to meet people where they are, the voters where they are. Let's talk about that, because it just seemed like one thing that is just a fact in terms of the polling that's come out of this election is the Democrats losing with support with the working class, as it were, and really, especially with the Hispanic community here in Florida, that's been kind of an erosion over the last several election cycles here. And so, what do you hope that you can try to do to try to alleviate that fissure there? Daniel, are you here with us? Hello, Daniel, there?
Yes, can you still hear me?
Yeah. Okay, now we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. No, I think it gets down to the basics in terms of what our policies are going to do to make their lives better. So a good example of that, President Trump has spent the last 4 years constantly running for president, saying that he was going to work to lower people's costs. But then he signs executive orders on day one that rescinds an executive order from President Biden that helps deal with rising insurance costs when it comes to prescription drugs. He signed an executive order on his first day that eliminates the ability for us to ensure that there's no discrimination when it comes to federal contracts. He signed an executive order that pardoned people that viciously beat police officers and law enforcement on January 6th. And I think it's going to be important in order for us to be able to not only convey to voters that we are for making sure that healthcare is affordable and accessible. We are for ensuring that our grandmothers and our parents can afford their prescription drugs without going into bankruptcy or having to file down their pills. We are for ensuring that we have safe communities where you can walk down the street without fear of reprisal. That's what we're for as a party. And I think in order for us to be able to convey that message to voters, it's not only telling voters what President Trump is doing every single day to make their lives worse, but what we will do as an alternative to make their lives better.
All right, Daniel Henry, the chair of the Duval County Democratic Executive Committee and a candidate for vice chair for the Florida Democratic Party. Good luck to you tomorrow, Daniel.
Thank you so much. And Mitch, you may not know this, so I'll give you some breaking news. Jaden has officially withdrawn for the race for vice chair. So I really appreciate the dedication that he put into his race and what he represented and making sure that we had a young voice be elected to party leadership. And I look forward to the opportunity to be elected this Saturday.
All right. Well, congrats. All right. Thank you so much.
We'll see you tonight, my friend. Have a good, safe travels.
All right. Soon to you, Alan.
Okay. Again, it's 11:46 right now. If you're just tuning in, you'll see the skinny here. I'm Mitch Perry with Alan Clendenin, Tampa City Council member and member of the Democratic National Committee. Okay. We've only got 14 minutes here. I'm going to get to some stuff here quickly here. Let's talk about what I just mentioned a moment ago, this perception, not a perception, I think a reality. The Democrats have lost touch with working class voters. Let's talk about immigration, Alan. This week we had Donald Trump is going to sign the Laken Riley Act today. This was passed. Laken Riley was a Georgia nursing student who was murdered by an undocumented Venezuelan immigrant. The legislation provides for the detention of undocumented immigrants charged with theft-related crimes as well as assault on police officers or acts causing death or bodily harm to an individual. Now, there are those on the left who say it's dangerous because it allows for the deportation of people who have only been accused and not convicted of such crimes. However, you've had support here from Democrats, not tons of it, but 12 Democrats in the Senate, including Ruben Gallego from Arizona, who was a co-sponsor of the legislation, 46 members in the House. There was only one from Florida Democratic delegation, Jared Moskowitz, who did support it. But let's talk about immigration, where the public is. And this is one poll. This is New York Times Ipsos from I believe last week. They asked the question, do you support or oppose deporting immigrants in the country illegally who arrived during the recent wave of migration to the southern border over the last 4 years? 64% say they either strongly support or somewhat support that opinion versus 36% who oppose. And then on the question of deporting undocumented immigrants overall, 56% support, 41% oppose. This seems to be one of these issues here where the Democrats, and you're seeing it again, you saw the vote here, where some Democrats are changing their mindset on this because they're looking at where they want to be, where the voters are, so to speak. What are your thoughts about that?
This is something that's not just the United States of America. Mm-hmm. It's worldwide.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're seeing this. And part of it is because we have leaders that are exploiting communities that cannot defend themselves for political purposes. These issues, like so many of our issues, are never black and white. There's never a one size fits all. And so you have to look at them individually. From what you just described, one case is not the same as another. Clearly, there's going to be cases that we probably could reach consensus on that, yes, that person should be deported or gone or incarcerated.
It does seem to be on the case of people, undocumented immigrants who have made already, criminal acts.
The key is accused.
Well, right now, in terms of the quote-unquote mass deportations that are going on right now, that has been the top goal that the Trump administration has said they're going after. And there doesn't seem to be a popular support for that.
Well, and you can see, of course, why that on the surface sounds good. Unfortunately, what happens especially with Democrats is we intellectualize everything. But we said, well, what about this case? And what about that case? But that's not easy to sell in a TikTok. It's not easy to sell on Fox News.
It. Yeah.
So it's.
I work in the media. I see how it works.
So that's the problem. That's the problem is that, when we try to, and then you end up get caught up in that quicksand of intellectualism. And
it's like a professor and supposing a working class voter, and so John. I don't know if John Judas and Rui Teixeira, they wrote the book. Back in 2002, The Emerging Democratic Majority. I'm familiar with these guys. Rui Teixeira wrote a piece yesterday I saw on RealClearPolitics.com, and he writes that basically he mentions immigration, also transgender rights and climate change as being issues that the Democratic left are very, fixated on, that there is a fissure with the rest of the public on. And, we saw this, obviously, the Trump campaign with the Kamala Harris ad on transgender rights, right? And I know you're smiling about it. I think Democrats, again, think that's ridiculous. It's such a small percentage of people when it comes to transgender rights. Obviously, they ran that ad because it seemed like it was working for them. And on climate, and we do a lot about talking about climate change on this program. I take it very seriously. seriously. But I also think that in terms of the voters, they are more, I think, overall for what they call the all the above approach, where it's not just focusing, on solar and wind, but also the traditional forms of, natural gas, which is where we get a majority of our power from here in Florida. That there's a disconnect. When they ask people, like, what are your top issues? Climate change is not at the top 5, top 10. It just isn't. So, again, I don't know if Democrats are willing to bend on these issues. I know you want to lose your principles, but I know you want to win elections. And it seems like, and this to me is a reminiscence of the 2004, after 2004, when you lost. It's the last time Democrats lost a popular vote, where they really kind of looked at, like, what's going on here? And of course, then things changed. Of course, the Iraq War was very unpopular. Democrats went back to the House in 2006, and Barack Obama came in 2008. But you may not get a Barack Obama coming back in the next couple of years here. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think that your arguments are valid, and clearly it is, on full display with the results of the 2024 elections nationwide. And again, we have to go back and look at the entire world. Part of the problem is we have these fascists that are exploiting the lowest common denominators and really using it as a divisive issue against Democrats. Some things, though, there are some bottom lines that you cannot waver on. Defending human rights is one of them. You have to stand up for that. Defending, healthcare rights. It's just a litmus test for humanity. Ensuring that we take care of folks that can't take care of themselves in our society. That's just a basic bottom line for me. I can't compromise on that. Standing up for people that can't stand up for themselves, I can't compromise on that. And quite honestly, the climate, I don't care whether you're Republican or Democrat, you're breathing the same damn air. Yeah. And we should stand up for that. That we clearly have a problem. And we have solutions. We have made tremendous gains over my lifetime in the environment. It used to be a lot of our rivers and our lakes were terribly polluted. We've clawed back through legislation that we've clawed those back. I mean, remember you used to go to Los Angeles, you couldn't breathe.
Right, smog.
But we ended up forcing these, catalytic converters, and we forced the blending of gasolines. We've, completely transformed, breathing in the Los Angeles basin. Unfortunately, you go to China, you don't have that privilege. Those people are breathing smog and toxins every day. I don't know if there's a compromise to that. Mm-hmm. How do you compromise on the health and well-being of the people that you represent? I just don't think you do. Okay.
Well, now you're gonna vote for Democratic if you're still in the DNC. A couple of weeks, right? The DNC is having
next week.
Okay, right, next week. And that's interesting in its own part. Although I think, I don't think sometimes it's being overemphasized, because I know that there's talk about, like you mentioned, Hakeem Jeffries and who is a Democratic leader. Why should there be one right now, right? I mean, the fact is, and certainly it's like the DNC chair is not going to be that. Jamie Harrison, who had been the DNC chair, I don't know how many people, know that, right? But there's an emphasis on this.
That's because when the Democrats have the White House, the DNC basically just becomes a political wing and reports to the White House. The real power in the party is the West Wing, the political operation, the West Wing, and they give the DNC the marching orders. So Jamie Harrison was, the chair of the DNC, but he was reporting and working on behalf of Joe Biden's White House. We are not in the White House. The DNC actually becomes the voice of the Democratic Party. So who is chair of the Democratic Party is much more influential as an opposition party than when we were in the White House.
So we've got an election coming up. I want to read something this is interesting. 2 DNC members from California named David Atkins and Michael Kapp. They wrote a piece for the Washington Monthly recently. I want to quote to you about this, your thoughts. They write, quote, "The DNC is top-heavy, lacks transparency, even to its members, relies on often out-of-touch Beltway consultants, and endows its chair with too much power. The party is a tool of the president in years when Democrats control the White House and are at the mercy of whoever gets the job done when, as is the case now, the party is out in the cold. The DNC chair appoints 75 of its 400-odd members, ensuring it runs the table on any vote. DNC members are not given any insight into budget decisions, let alone any say. To prevent organizing between rare meetings, we are not even provided with other DNC members' contact information. Many state parties don't even issue public lists of their DNC members. Obsessed with unity, leadership has used staff to organize against members advocating for minor rule changes from the floor of the DNC's occasional meetings. It has been forced to apologize for doing so from the dais. What do you think about that?
Michael's a good friend of mine. That's, was that the DNC or the Florida Democratic Party? Because it sounds like both. Yes, to all the above. Some things I would take issue with, but it is problematic. And the 75 that he talked about, the appointments, I agree that needs to go away. We have similar issues in Florida that we need rules changes to fix. I've been an advocate for rules change in the Florida Democratic Party for years. I've been an advocate for those types of changes at the national party, but it takes they're big ships and it takes a long time to move. A lot of the things that I came forward in the Florida Democratic Party back when I issued a plan for it in 2012 and 2014.
Right.
Ironically, while I wasn't successful in my quest to lead it, a lot of my ideas have been implemented and are now part of the structure of the Florida Democratic. So for anybody young that is listening, never underestimate your contributions. It's small contributions you put out in the atmosphere today. You plant that seed today and you'll reap the crop sometime in the future.
So we got a note, email from Bob from Palmetto, and he says, please pass this on to your Democratic guests. Bob writes, I've been registered as a Democrat for years and just switched to NPA, non-party affiliate. I think the Dems played right into Trump's hands by emphasizing how evil he is. They don't really present any solid agenda on how to keep the momentum we had going. Let's see some improvement, please. That is a common, I think, a common perception or thought I've heard more expressed recently. I've certainly felt that way. The Dems in the last 10 years have become intellectually lazy, where it's been Donald Trump is the worst thing ever, and that's our campaign platform. And you got to vote for something and not just against something.
Well, again, I think that's part of our either inability or people not listening to what the Democratic Party stands for. The Democratic Party clearly has and stands for the values that represent the largest swath of Americans. We stand for working people. We stand for our Black community. We stand for our Latin and Hispanic and Brown communities. We stand for young people and ensuring that there's public education, ensuring there's opportunities to move through your cities in a quick and efficient way. We stand for the environment, making sure you're drinking clean water, that you're breathing clean air. We stand for labor. We stand for working people and their rights to organize and the rights for a good quality of life and a living wage. I mean, what do the Republicans stand for? Oligarchs, billionaires. What do they stand for? Destroying the environment. If you're a billionaire and you can live in a compound and you have your own private jet and you can have your own art hanging in your own house that you don't have to go to a public facility to watch. If you're self-contained and you have all that money, absolutely right. You know who represents you? The Republican Party. But if you're a working person or you're a poor person in this country,
what happened in this election? What happened?
I think, again, the TikToks, people are the Joe Rogans of the world. They were able to convince people that somehow these billionaires were going to solve their everyday problems, and they were used.
Well, okay. We've had a little over a minute left, so we don't have much time to go back and forth on this. I didn't hear too much about billionaires in the race. I heard, well, I don't know. I mean, we can go discuss this. Do you think Joe Biden is gone? I know we don't. He's moved on. Kamala Harris has moved on. Who are you supporting for the DNC chair?
Ken Martin.
Okay, and he seems to be the front runner at this point. He's the Minnesota Democratic chairman, right?
Yes.
What do you like about him?
He's a outspoken advocate for states, for diversification of resources. He understands that down ballot races are extraordinarily important. We're never going to support, I've said that, you've heard me say this, I'm sure, before. We are never going to support a top of the ticket standing on the shoulders of a sea of Republicans. We've got to start at the bottom and work our way back up, and that's the key to success in Florida as well. We've got to start focusing on city council races and county commission races and our local electeds in every community across all 67 counties. If we don't start focusing on the local places, we're going to lose the top. We've got to start focusing on the bottom.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Alan Quindenon, Tampa City Council member, Democratic National Committee member. He is up for re-election tomorrow in Orlando to the DNC. We wish you luck in that.
It's going to be a tough race. It's a new system they're implementing, and we just came out of a devastating 2024 election, so it's going to be a scramble.
Alan, thank you so much for joining us for the hour here. We want to thank Skip Sassy. He's been our engineer. Irene Matthews on the phones. Stay tuned for Art in Your Ear with Joe Ellen Schilke, the hostess with the mostest. I'm Mitch Perry. I'll be back here next week. Please stay tuned. You are listening to WMNF 88.5 FM Tampa. See you next week.